be leaders. And so it is with my immense pleasure that I introduce you to Sarah, and we'll have an opportunity to learn from her and discuss with her her experiences. So Sarah, if you're ready, we can begin.
Great. Thank you very much, Niels, and thank you, Frederick. Very kind introduction, Niels. And good morning, everybody. Frederick and I are just going to share my screen, and then I look forward to talking you through some of my thoughts for today. Frederick, let me know when you can see it.
Yeah, I just made you a presenter, so you think I think you should accept something. He's going to ask you to accept it.
All right, bear with me a moment. Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect.
Great. Lovely. Yeah. Okay. Well, what I'm going to talk about this morning is about how to deliver technology transformation, but without talking at all about technology. I guess the main message that I wanted to discuss today is that I think successful technology transformation is actually not about the tech. It's about some other things, and I'm going to talk about those other things. But I'll start with some very brief introductions to give you some context. Just a little bit on who I am. I was CIO at an organisation called the National Trust in the UK for 6 years. I've been at EDF Energy, part of the French EDF group, as CIO for just over a year. My background, though, isn't IT. My background is operations and customer service, sales, marketing, and all sorts of other things. And I was very honoured to be named CIO of the Year in the public sector category last year. A little word on the National Trust for people who aren't familiar with it. It's a UK-based charity that looks after coastline and castles and houses and heritage assets all around the country. It's a very large organisation. It's a charity. It has 200 million people visiting its places throughout the year, and 5 million members. So it's a very strong, large body in the UK. I'm going to talk about a transformation programme that I delivered at the National Trust, and it was called the SSP, which was the Systems Simplification Programme. And very briefly, I'm going to give you a sense of what the programme actually was, although, as I've said, I'm not going to talk about the technology, I'm going to talk about some other things. It was a programme to completely change how the National Trust operated, both in terms of how it engaged with its customers and how it operated internally. It was about finding ways to deliver brilliant customer service, to help inspire real loyalty in our visitors and our members, so that we could encourage people to participate in our charitable work and contribute to what we did. It was about changing internal processes around procurement and finance, and using data to really understand our internal operations and our customers. And I'm going to say no more than that. I could talk for a very long time about the actual technical program. But what I wanted to talk about today is the importance of delivering the culture change that was necessary to ensure that we delivered the SSP's benefits. You can't just deliver technology, you've got to do all the surrounding cultural change and engagement and support of your people if they're going to embrace the new technology and make a difference and drive those benefits. And I have 3 very simple rules that we used that for us worked very well, and I'm going to talk through what those 3 rules were. The first was about starting by truly listening to our people. In other words, if you ask all your staff and your customers what they think is an opportunity within your organisation and what they think would make a difference and what they think is a pain point at any one time, and really listen to that, you get rich insight and it helps you understand what you need to do. What you're looking at here is quite a strange set of photos of some teddy bears, people with a teddy bear. And what I did at the National Trust was to insist that everybody in my IT team listened, actively listened, by going out and spending a minimum of 3 days every year visiting National Trust places all over the country and asking whoever they met, what works for you, what doesn't work for you, how can we help in IT. And this had all sorts of benefits, but one of the benefits was it started to become clear what the issues were and what the problems were and what the opportunities were that we could do to fix that. And actually getting my IT people to get out and canvass and discuss those issues with our staff was very powerful. They had to take this teddy bear with them. They had to take a photo of themselves with an IT teddy bear doing whatever they were doing, cleaning tables, serving customers, restoring a dry stone wall, whatever it was. And they had to blog their experiences, and we did awards at the end of every year. We even did a penalty for, as a bit of a joke for some people a couple of times when they didn't at the end of the year do their teddy bear related work experience, and I made them go out with this enormous teddy bear, which soon taught them that they should make sure that they took the experience very, very seriously and take time to listen to their customers. As a result of that listening, we were able to define a very clear strategy, and that's the second ridiculously simple rule. If you can get complete clarity about what it is that you're trying to achieve, and for us it was in response to all the feedback we'd received on our teddy bear visits, then you have got a direction of travel that you can hold on to all the way through delivering a big program. So we articulated some very clear goals in our program. It was about driving internal cost savings, and it was about increasing revenue through engaging with our customers in a whole variety of different ways. And we constantly re-articulated the end goals and what we were trying to achieve in all of our communications. And we linked it all the time to the National Trust's strategy. We always linked it to the core purpose. If we don't make this big transformation, we're not going to have enough money to look after the beautiful places in our care, and that's why we are doing this program. In other words, we didn't talk about technology, we talked about the National Trust's core purpose. The third and final simple rule is about engagement and communication. And we relentlessly communicated to all of our staff and all of our volunteers all the way through. We did all sorts of different devices in a kind of omni-channel approach. We did regular email bulletins, we did video diaries, we did drawing, we did newsletters, we did videos, we did blogs. We had lots of local champions producing local videos that we posted on the internet to share experiences as we went through the technology transformation. And we had a very important tone to our communications, which was about being honest. So absolutely every piece of communications for the entire 3 years of the program framed what we were doing in terms of, firstly, what's going well, and secondly, what's going badly. And we talked really openly and explicitly about what was going badly in the program, because of course in a major transformation program there are going to be some things that go wrong. And we talked about that right from the beginning. You can see in the bottom left hand corner we had a slide that I always used, which was called Sarah's depressing messages, where I said to people all the way through, there are going to be some things that are going to go wrong. That's normal. Hold your nerve. No one will die. Actually, this is part of delivering big change, and let's embrace it. A bit more on that, to give you some more examples. We did lots of road shows. We went out and about. We had local champions constantly talking and finding all sorts of different ways to engage with our people and make them help them to understand what the program was all about. And they responded to it brilliantly. Now, in the top left-hand corner there, you can see rather a strange drawing. I'm going to show you a bit more of that now. We used lots of different ways to reach people. We had songs and rap and poetry and even dance sometimes, because different people respond to communications in different ways. And one of the things we did was to ask people to draw pictures. So we said to people in lots of roadshows, we've just described this big technology transformation program to you. Now we would like you to draw a picture of it. And to start with, people would look at you with a very strange look on their face and say, how are you supposed to draw a picture of a technology-enabled transformation program? But then people did, and they drew all sorts of things. This is just a couple of samples, including not just excited pictures like the rocket taking off into the sky, going to a new world of better technology, but also things like that picture of a snakes and ladders game, where people heard the honesty with which we described the fact that there would be some good things about the program, but there would be some difficult things about the program. One of the things we said was we're going to standardize all of our internal processes, and you, our staff, won't like that. Because you like doing things in your own individual ways, but that's not good for the organization overall, and here's why it's not good. So you won't enjoy that, but please understand why we're doing it, and embrace it. And that honesty was really powerful. The pictures that people drew were so great, some of them, that we wanted to do something more with it. And what we did was to turn them into this. And we actually made a montage of so many different people's pictures, turned it into this story of a roller coaster going from the left to the right. And you can see on the left-hand side there were some of the pictures that people drew of the difficulty of how it used to be before the new technology was in place. You've got pictures of Stonehenge and hell and a penny farthing bicycle, through to the roller coaster of the ups and downs of delivering major change, all the way through to the finish on the right-hand side with positivity and rainbows and happy customers and happy staff and so on. And we used that picture as an internal communications tool of itself to share with all of our people. The last thing I wanted to say then about my 3 simple rules, which really helped us deliver huge change at the National Trust, is that now that I've been at EDF Energy, I've employed those same 3 simple rules, and they're already working to great effect. So I have repeated making people go out with a teddy bear, and now they go out with our little mascot who's called Zingy, and there's a photo montage of lots of my people doing their Zingy visits at the moment, and they have been brilliant about doing that and have really engaged with the opportunity to go and talk to their internal customers. I also did a survey before I even started, asking everybody, if you were CIO and you could only achieve one thing in your first 6 months, what would you do? And then I took all of their responses and worked out the things that they most wanted me to do, all with a view to helping me form that strategy that I'll come on to in a moment. My team don't know it yet, but they too will have a penalty if they don't do their Zingy work experience. They're going to have to take this enormous Zingy out with them on their visits. They don't know that yet. Step number 2 then has been to define a clear strategy. In my last 12 months, I've listened to all that feedback. My teams have listened to all the feedback, and we've come out with a set of strategic goals around what digital transformation we are going to drive at EDF Energy. And then finally, I am relentlessly communicating and engaging and doing all sorts of things, lots and lots of road shows. We use Yammer internally, and every Friday I do something called #CelebrateSuccess. And in 140 characters or less, I just describe some brilliant little thing that I have observed my team doing really well. And that celebration of success has been a really powerful force. I ask my team for marks out of 10. Every month we do a simple survey, marks out of 10, how are you feeling about life? And we track the results and we follow up on what we see. I do surgeries, we do all sorts of things to really make sure that I'm engaging with my team and I'm listening to them and I'm hearing them. And the results of all of that, and the last point that I wanted to make to you, have been great, because in the bottom left-hand corner there you can see our annual staff survey results. And we have just done the first survey in a year since I joined across the whole of EDF Group, which is about, I think, about 120,000 people. And what you can see there is that Enterprise IT, my team, has got the highest engagement score of 85% of staff engagement, which is higher than the UK entity, which is EDF Energy, and even higher than the rest of EDF Group. So I'm really proud of my team because they have embraced all these methods of communication and engagement. And an engaged and happy team is, of course, a more productive team. And it sets me up to be able to deliver that strategy and deliver the business outcomes that I have set out under the strategy in number 2. So, to recap, it's so simple, but what has worked for me was not concentrating on delivering great technology, although of course I always try to do that. It's about listening to what your customers say, defining a clear strategy in response to that, and then communicating and engaging with your people to make sure that you can deliver your strategic goals. And that's all I was going to cover today, and I'd be delighted to hear any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you,
Sarah.
Yeah, go ahead, Neil. Yeah.
Oh, no, it's okay. No, I was just going to say thank you. And we've got already one question from the audience, and we'll get to that from Thomas. Thomas asks basically that why is it that in many organizations it's really hard to convince other senior level managers, other CXOs, about the importance of people and culture for digital transformation? That there's still this focus on the technology part and not enough on the cultural aspects, the customer journeys, etc. What's helped you get the rest of the senior management team on board about the multi-facets of the transformation efforts?
Well, it was very hard, and some of my colleagues didn't, to start with, agree, although lots did. And what helped at the National Trust was that our Director General completely understood and was very, very supportive of the whole process. But it was a gradual evolution over time, and in part, we needed to deliver it to prove it. So as we started to communicate and as we started to engage and we started to go and talk to people, we gathered feedback all the way, and the feedback from people who weren't in head office, the real people on the ground who were doing the work, that was very, very powerful, and getting their views all the way through really helped. And then what we did was that we made sure that we had champion case studies. So we always picked particular locations, particular properties to pilot some of our new technology, and we engaged in a test and learn approach. And what we did was to carefully select those places to make sure that they were they had good management teams who really understood the power of culture change and so on, and they were our laboratory properties. And the case studies there helped demonstrate the importance of communication and engagement as being as important as the technology. And then, of course, we talked lots. We took advice from lots of other organisations who, of course, we all have stories about times when we have put in a new system and we haven't got the training right, and we haven't got the engagement right, and we haven't got the sponsorship right, and then everybody says the system hasn't worked. And of course, it nearly always isn't the case that it's the system that hasn't worked. It has been all the surrounding leadership and communication. So we had lots of case studies around that. By the end of it, everybody was convinced of the importance of engagement in culture change. But to start with, that wasn't the case. So it was quite a lonely time for some of us in the beginning. But we slowly but surely won everyone over.
That's great. And another, I'm going to combine two questions. One is around the assessment and compensation scheme. How does that work? And related to that, I think, is what happens with people who don't embrace cultural change? So how do you reward those? So the assessment and compensation scheme, how does that work? And related, what do you do with people who don't embrace the cultural change?
With people who don't want to embrace it, you don't want to try and victimize them or publicly make that difficult for them. You find different ways to engage with them and different ways to support them and try and understand root cause as to why they might be finding it hard to engage. We met lots of resistance to some of the very big changes that we were making. People who had worked in a particular way for 30 years and didn't want to change it. And that was very hard. And we were just very open and honest. We listened, we talked to people, we employed lots of different methods to reach different people. As I say, some people loved some of the fun videos that we did. Other people hated them and loved the really straight, dry, written papers that we did describing what was going on. Different people responded in different ways, and we just made sure that we got to everybody on their terms and not on ours, and encouraged people to understand what's in it for me. That was one of the big questions we talked about a lot. What is in it for me? How can we help this be appealing for this person? And often the only thing that was in it for a person was the fact that it was going to help the National Trust be a more successful organisation. And because people who work at the National Trust are very passionate about its conservation work, that was a very helpful message. I'm not quite sure about the question about compensation and assessment. If we're talking about staff pay, so I'm really sorry, I don't quite know how to answer that because I don't know what the question is. We didn't get into staff pay here. We didn't financially incentivize people to engage with change. We did softer things like my hashtag celebrate success every Friday. That's that's a softer way of recognizing the kind of behavior that you're trying to socialize.
So that's quite interesting. So you did not rely on, say, bonuses or like you just said, or any other kind of financial reward to motivate the transformation, to motivate particular behaviors.
Well, sorry, now I'm understanding the question better. No, there was something very powerful we did. So personal compensation, no, not at all. But for everybody who works at a National Trust property, if you run that property, you care very much as a property manager about having your lowest possible costs and your highest possible income. Of course you do. And what people at properties were able to see was that we were delivering the technical capability to enable them to reduce costs or generate more income. So, for example, some of the big data tools that we gave them helped them understand who their local residents were and find very clever, low-cost ways to do new marketing to local residents to encourage more people to visit. And so they would get more income from having more visitors. Equally, by putting in new tills, which was one of the things that we did, they realised that they would be able to have one team of till operators, of customer service staff, instead of three. Usually at a property, you have some people who work at visitor reception, welcoming visitors all day. You have people who work in cafes, and you have people who work in the retail shop. And what they realised was, if we had the same till in each of those places, and you could just train one group of people and have a smaller group of people who followed the visitor flow throughout the day and had flexible skills to work in the cafe at lunchtime and the retail shop at the end of the day, for example. So they were certainly incentivized by wanting to deliver fabulous service to their customers and do that as efficiently as possible and get more income for their property, which meant that they would have more money to fix a leaking roof, for example, which is the whole point of the National Trust.
That's a great example. And so I agree with your hesitation earlier. I mean, I also, I guess, wouldn't consider that necessarily a direct financial incentive. And as you say, that the property managers weren't going to get paid more, but what you did do is provide them with tools to help them be more successful at what they were trying to be successful at, which was specifically increasing income and reducing operational costs, and providing them with the tools to achieve both. So that's really interesting. How as you start applying these approaches to EDF Energy, obviously, as we already saw in your example, and that's up on the screen, you start to adapt them to the situation. And I'd love to hear from you some ideas on what helps you adapt these insights to a particular situation. How would you? What kind of advice would you have for the adaptation piece of it?
So the two organisations are very different, the National Trust and EDF Energy. They have very different cultures, and the same approaches wouldn't always work in both. So there are some things that I did at the National Trust that I wouldn't do at EDF Energy, and equally there are things at EDF Energy that I'm now doing that I wouldn't have done at the Trust. So for example, something I did at the Trust was quite a lot of singing. So we, as one of the means of communication, we would get a group of us into a room and we would take a well-known song and we would rewrite the words to be all about the SSP. And we did quite a few fun songs that we recorded, and we used them as the backing track for videos. And it was just, a different way of hooking people as a way of engaging with the program. I wouldn't do that at EDF Energy. That we operate a large number of nuclear power stations. We have a very important safety culture. So a very important part of how DF Energy works is an extreme focus on safety for everyone. And actually that would be very incongruous. That wouldn't work with a bunch of people going into a room and recording a song. So I don't do singing. One of the things I have done at EDF Energy that I didn't do at the National Trust, but something that I will now do wherever I go, is to do a little survey of my people before I join, which is what you can see in the top left-hand corner of the slide there. I asked everybody in Enterprise IT, tell me things that are good about the IT team. Tell me things that are bad about life in the IT team. Tell me what you would change if you were me. And it was really powerful insight. And what I did, my simple rule number one, was to truly listen to it. And I was really proud a few weeks ago to be able to stand up in front of my team and say, here are the things that you said to me a year ago when I joined, and I committed to you that I would or wouldn't do the things that you said, and here's what we've done as a result. So that's been a very powerful technique. The hashtag Celebrate Success event every Friday that I do is new. I didn't need to do that at the National Trust. At the National Trust, there was a very positive culture of almost talking about everything that was good almost too much, and celebrating success a lot, which is why I felt the need to talk more about what wasn't going well as well as what was going well. At EDF Energy, my IT team has not always been well supported or well regarded in the organisation, and I've got some great people who are doing great work, and I want the world to know that. So actually it is more appropriate at EDF Energy to talk about success and to actually celebrate positivity in an organisation that is otherwise takes its work very, very seriously and doesn't always allow itself to pat itself on the back and say well done. So different techniques, and the only way I know how to have those different techniques is to start by truly listening and reflecting on what I've heard, and then working out a plan that is right for that organisation and might not be right for another.
I encourage others in the meeting, in the webinar, to write in questions. And in the meantime, Sarah, one of the other aspects, excuse me, other cultural aspects that I'm noticing in effective organizations is introducing much more of a test and learn environment. We're increasingly dealing with a greater number of uncertainties. It's much more difficult to, excuse me, plan an approach to a challenge and then execute as planned. It's much more about testing and learning, experimenting, adapting as you go along. How are you introducing more of a test and learn culture at first at National Trust and then at EDF Energy? What would you advise as helping to do that?
At the National Trust, I'll give you one example. We were rigorous with our test and learn approach to data. So we pulled together an enormous number of customer records to really understand who our customers were, where they came from, how long they'd been a member, how often they visited, did they go into the shop, did they book a holiday cottage, did they ever donate money, all those different things. And with that data, we conducted a series of low risk, potentially high impact exercises, and we had control cell samples for each exercise, and then we ran a series of tests where we just took a small sample of supporters and tried something new, and some of them worked brilliantly and some of them didn't. And so we learnt, for example, that we could send an email nudge, an email prompt to our customers at particular times of the week saying, you might want to come and visit a particular property near you on this weekend because the bluebells are in flower, for example. And we discovered through testing that if you sent that email early in the week, it didn't have much impact, but actually a Thursday night or a Saturday morning had high impact. It was low risk, you know, we didn't lose lots and lots of visitors. It was only upside. It was just a way of encouraging more visitors. And that mindset of trying different things and then getting an array of results that helped shape your marketing strategy was a very powerful device within the National Trust, and people really embraced that. EDF Energy. Go on.
Oh, actually, can I just interrupt there, because that's a fantastic example. Can you say a little more about? Can you elaborate on that example around any training or coaching that helped? I mean, that requires, for example, even developing the hypotheses that you're then going to test and figuring out what's a proper control for that. That's not easy. And what helped develop the talent to conduct those kinds of experiments?
Well, that's very interesting, because it was particularly hard at the National Trust because we have a dispersed model with local marketeers. So we have people who do marketing at every property. So we had to reach about 500 people to get those skills working. So that was very hard. So what we did was a variety of things. We had a small central team that was made up of brilliant people, first of all. So we had some brilliant data scientists, and we wouldn't have been able to even start without that. Then we found our laboratory properties that I mentioned before, with teams that were really up for experimenting and trying something new, because there were always some properties who would be more likely to experiment than others who might find it more difficult. So we found laboratory properties. We tried some things, and then we took the case studies of what worked and what didn't and did a whole engagement and training and communication program. So we took people from properties where it had worked, and we took them all around the country, and we gave presentations and roadshows to all the different marketing teams. We did lots of training, and in particular we had to train 500 web content editors. So all of the content on the National Trust app and on the National Trust website is live and updated in real time by 500 different people. So if you are driving in your car along the road and you have the app, if you're a young family, you might get a message popping up saying, it looks like you're near a particular house or a particular castle or something, and there is face painting and children's activities going on in the top barn. You might want to come and join us. But another car next to you on the road might have an elderly couple in who we knew through our data liked going to see the bluebells, and they would get a message saying, the bluebells have just come out this morning. You might like to come for an early morning walk. One of our gardeners is giving a guided tour around the garden. And that ability to serve personalized, local, relevant content based on GPS tracking, served by 500 different people in real time, was intensely complex and extremely powerful. So what we had to do is train all those 500 people in how to use the content management tool, how to write attractive content, how to use the right branding guidelines and so on. And very importantly, what we did was to empower them. So what we had done before was to have a series of 3 steps to control what people wrote. They wrote a submission for the website, and it went to somebody in head office who checked it and sent it back and said, 8 out of 10, you need to do better than this. And then somebody else checked it and controlled it. And what we did was to take away all the controls and just said, it's on you. It's not the end of the world if you get it wrong. It's live content that we can change. But here are the guidelines, and here's how you need to make it work. And that empowerment was a very important part of making that work. We had to carry on doing all of that training and engagement for, well, I'm sure they're still doing it now. So that's not a one-time hit. That's a constant discussion about what works and what doesn't, and sharing good practice and socializing new ways of doing things. The teams really embraced it, and the website and the app went on to win all sorts of great awards and things. I mean, it was a really, really good product. Does that give you a feel?
It's fantastic. And just one more quick question on that before moving to the example you were about to give regarding EDF Energy. And then you just alluded to it with regard to the time frame. From the moment that you started these efforts with the small central team and starting to experiment, identifying the properties and starting to experiment with them until you started to scale the efforts and train the first 500 web content editors. How much time passed through that? Are we talking about 2 years here, or is this about, just to get a sense of how long this takes, because this is a journey, obviously.
Okay, well, lots of different answers to that. So from the first time we started to have enough data to be able to do some very clever centralized testing and control sample testing, to the point where we made that data and that marketing capability available, that was probably quite short. That was probably about 9 months. Whereas the time from, but it was much longer for the website, because writing the content management system took longer than we thought. And so from the beginning of the design of the new web content management system all the way through to going live with the website, that was probably about 1.5 years. That was a good 3 or 4 months longer, though, or even 6 months longer than we had wanted it to be. So some things were very quick, and some things were slower. And there will, I mean, I don't know, but I suspect there are still some properties now who still don't have some of those tools because they haven't got there yet, and it might be for all sorts of different reasons. But you start to get to critical mass.
And then at EDF Energy, building a test and learn. What would you highlight as some approaches that have helped establish a more of a test and learn environment at EDF? Given that there's obviously, you just highlighted the importance of safety, it's a much more cautious environment, I would assume. So I would assume it's more challenging, or maybe not. Maybe they actually like the test and learn as a way to mitigate the risk.
So it's really important as leaders that we make it clear that the consequences of getting it wrong are not going to be some kind of punitive telling off. And so if senior leaders own the test and learn approach, then staff can relax and not worry that it's going to somehow come back on them. So I'll just give you one small example that's top of my mind at the moment because it's very relevant. One of the things I have done with listening, rule number 1, to my team is to hear that we need a clear strategy around my team's capacity and workload. I've got a very, very stretched IT team. And what I did in December was to say, as well as your monthly marks out of 10 that you always do for me on this online survey, which we find so useful, just this month I'm going to ask you another question, which is, do you agree with the statement, my workload is manageable? And do you agree, strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree, whatever? And I've no idea, team, if this is going to work. This is an experiment. I want you to also say, if you don't mind, what team you work in, and also describe any other teams that you think are particularly busy. I'm just trying to understand what this workload issue is. Is it just one tiny part of my team, or actually is it across the whole board? And I said, in my verbal and written communication to my team, this might not give us any actionable data. I'm asking you to do a relatively low effort, zero cost activity here by just simply ticking a box on a survey for me. And it might be that I come back to you and say it didn't work, the data doesn't tell me anything. But that's okay. As ever, no one will have died. You know, it was worth a go. Low cost, low risk, low effort. However, it might produce something interesting, so let's see. And more people filled in that survey last month than any other month. And I looked at the data and I got some incredibly rich, actionable data. I didn't know what I was going to get, but I did. And I was able to share with the team saying, there is one particular team that gets named over and over and over again. And this is the team where actually we have the most pain. And so this is the team that I'm going to focus on their workload. And, you know, we didn't know if we were going to get actionable data in this experiment, but it turns out that we did. Thank you for trying. But I think if it hadn't worked, they would have been very relaxed about not getting any actionable data.
That's fantastic. That's a great example. I've got another question with regards to your engagement with the board. I know at the trust you engage with the board, and we're quite effective at that. Are you going through any similar engagement with the board at EDF Energy with regards to any of the transformations that you're leading at EDF Energy?
Yeah.
And if so, can you highlight what helps, some key things that help you help the board?
Okay, so you can see on that slide there, number 2, define a clear strategy. That is the IT strategy. As part of a very big presentation, as you can imagine, that I took to the board in September, and engaging with the board, as always, is absolutely essential to success. And the technique that made it successful at EDF Energy was completely different to the technique that made it successful at the National Trust. At the National Trust, what I did was to talk not about the cost of the programme, which was a very high number, it was about £40 million, but I instead talked about the benefits. Everything was about
Sarah?
Hello? We lost sound.
Hi, I just lost the connection.
operating model is
Oh, Sarah, sorry to interrupt, Sarah. We lost your connection. We lost your connection. So I lost you right when you were saying that at the National Trust, you did not talk about costs. You talked about benefits, and then I lost you. So maybe if you could pick up from there.
Apologies. And can you hear me now?
Definitely.
Yes, I can.
Thank you. So what worked at the National Trust was talking about the benefits, not the cost. At EDF Energy, we have a different operating model where instead of one IT team, we have 4 IT teams and 3 different business units. So the different business units have their own IT teams. So what mattered a lot to everybody on the executive board was believing that their business unit was going to be properly supported, engaged and represented. So what I did at EDF Energy was not go and present the CIO's IT strategy, but instead I went in with all of the IT directors and we had jointly worked on the strategy together, and we had all of our arguments about what we thought would work and what wouldn't, and we had come up with an integrated strategy that was right for the whole organisation, and we jointly presented, and we did something very powerful, as it turns out, which was that we all talked about a bit of the business that wasn't us. So instead of the IT director for the nuclear power station business talking about his bits, he talked about why the IT strategy mattered to our retail customer business, for example. And we all shared talking about all the different parts of the strategy and demonstrated that we were completely joined up and integrated. And that was incredibly powerful on the day because everybody, the executive board, just relaxed and believed that everyone's needs were being represented and that this was therefore an objective, sensible, well thought through strategy. We also used all the same techniques I've talked about being very honest. So we deliberately downplayed what we thought we could deliver in the first year. We didn't promise the earth. We articulated some of the things that might go wrong as we go on our journey of digital transformation. We acknowledged that we have some weaknesses. We were very, very open and honest about that. And that was a powerful way as well of making sure that we got the buy-in of the executive board.
Very cool. Very, very interesting. I know we are approaching the end of the webinar, and so please, if anyone has any additional questions, please feel free to write them in. And so I'm just making sure I've covered the questions that were written in. Okay, great. So I've covered the questions that were written in. So Sarah, going forward, then going forward with especially the part 3 with the relentless communication. That takes time. I would guess it takes time to develop point 3, the relentless communication and engagement. Do you ever feel that we're doing too much of this? It's not worth it. And how do you start prioritizing? Because like you said, at the National Trust, you explored and actually put into practice so many different ways of communicating and really understanding that there was a whole range of ways of engaging with people that resonated. Some like the singing, some wanted more of a standard scientific report. How do you figure out your portfolio of communication and engagement, and especially when do you figure out, okay, maybe we need to adapt this. Maybe we're spending too much time or not enough time. Can you tell me more about the adaptation, the test and learn for you regarding communication and engagement?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting what you said at the beginning there. There have been moments where, certainly about 6 months ago, maybe 9 months ago now, when we were doing a huge amount to try and engage with people. And I don't know if you can see the graph dipping on that little bit that says monthly enterprise IT pulse check. There was a dip around about March. The amber line, the line in the middle, is the one to follow, where despite all the good things that I'm describing to you, people, for all sorts of reasons, were feeling pretty fed up with life. And I started to wonder whether, and quite a lot of negativity was coming out, and there were times when I asked myself, actually, are we just asking too much? Are we almost pandering? And is this just never going to get us anywhere? But with something like engagement, you have to give it a long time, and you need to wait to see the results. And we kept going, and the scores have climbed and climbed. And that staff survey result in the bottom left is I mean, I didn't expect that for one moment. Some of the free text comments and the scores in that survey are extraordinary about how people feel truly respected and trusted and listened to. So it was worth it. I would like to have been able to go back to the Sarah Flannigan in March last year and say, hang on in there, because it's going to be worth it in the end. So you've got to keep the faith. That's the first thing. And then it's just recognizing when things have run their course. So for example, whenever we do our monthly survey, we get lots of free text comments, and my IT operations director decided to personally write an answer to every single person and wrote a response to the free text comments and published that. And what I've been thinking about in the last few weeks is actually that's beginning to go a bit flat, because we're just giving the same answers now every month, and we need to find some other way to refresh that. But that's because I've been talking to people and listening to people and hearing what they say. So it's trying things and seeing what works, and doing more of what does and turning down what doesn't, I think.
Well, and as you've demonstrated at National Trust and at EDF Energy, you lead by putting these principles into practice yourself, and that really helps then others lead as well in the same way. And it takes time. It sounds like you're saying it takes time for some of the effects to really materialize. But it's great. It's really fantastic. We are at the end of our time, unfortunately, and so thank you very much for taking the time to reflect on what's worked for you and what's helped you become such an effective leader. I really appreciate you sharing and discussing those insights with us.
Oh, thank you very much for asking me. It's been fun. Thanks very much.
Thank
you, and thank you everyone for participating. Frederick?
Yeah, a special thanks to Sarah, because I know that the last 24 hours were a little bit challenging for her on other levels. So really thankful for doing this, Sarah.
Thank you.
And thank you. I'm also very delighted. It very stimulates me in the way I'm working. I think I'm on the right track. Especially your opening statement, not about techno, was for me such a relief. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, let's call this an end. Thank you again, Sarah.
Okay.
We don't have any other webinars scheduled for now, but we are working on that. So probably as from March, we'll be running a new set of webinars. So I look forward to talk to you all then. And Sarah, you're most welcome to attend these as well, obviously.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Have a good day, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you again. Goodbye.
Have a great day. Thank you.
Bye.
Good day. Thank you. Bye.